It was a sunny morning in the forest when Spark, an agile red-furred squirrel, emerged from her hollow tree full of energy. She had slept deeply after spending the previous day collecting the juiciest nuts and filling her pantries to the brim. "Today is a great day to get more nuts," thought Spark as she quickly stretched, rubbing her face with her paws and grooming her shiny fur to get ready. Early birds trilled cheerfully around, lifting Spark's spirits. With a graceful jump, Spark descended to the ground and sniffed around looking for her breakfast. She found an acorn that had fallen from a nearby oak tree. "What luck!" she squeaked. She held it with her tiny paws and skillfully used her sharp teeth to peel it. The sweet taste filled her mouth, giving her the vitality needed to start her morning runs. The morning dew slightly moistened the fur on her paws as she ventured, amazed, among the ferns and wildflowers. She inhaled nature's perfume before swiftly climbing up a trunk, nimbly crossing the branches. She enjoyed the freedom of movement with the agility that her paws and tail provided. She reached a large branch from where she spotted a majestic oak tree full of ripe nuts. It was on the other side of a crystalline stream that flowed in a rocky bed dividing the forest. Without hesitation, Spark took impulse and launched herself between the trees towards the shore, landing masterfully on a rocky ledge at the water's edge. "The best nuts await me," she celebrated while licking her lips, imagining the delicacy she would soon taste. Only a narrow but firm wooden bridge built by humans to cross the stream separated her from the loaded tree. It was no problem for her accustomed feet, so without hesitation, she gracefully started running across the bridge. Halfway through her journey, a loud creak alarmed her alert senses. The bridge began to collapse right beneath her. In a quick reflex, her paws grabbed the edge just in time as the planks precipitated thunderously into the torrent. Spark was left hanging, stunned and incredulous, with half the path now completely destroyed before her eyes. Spark hung on with her trembling little paws to the end of the broken bridge, shocked and not knowing what to do. The thunder of the planks collapsing into the churning waters still echoed in her sensitive ears. Her breathing was agitated from the surprise and fright. Regaining calm, she looked up to examine the situation. The other half of the path had been completely destroyed. The wooden remains floated downstream or got stuck between some rocks. The stretch she needed to cross to reach the other side now seemed an impossible distance to save for the small squirrel. Spark felt how her emotion and enthusiasm for reaching the oak tree full of juicy nuts quickly vanished. Now how would she get to the other side to enjoy that feast that awaited her? She looked at the gap with dismay. It was too wide to jump. She would have to find another route, which meant a huge detour that would cost her much time and effort. Defeated, Spark curled up sadly on the rotten wood, and two thick tears sprouted from her hazel eyes. Why did this have to happen today of all days, which promised to be so great? She just wanted to enjoy her morning routine in search of her favorite food. Now her plan had been completely ruined. While she sobbed sulkily, a majestic owl heard her from his nearby nest. He silently perched beside her and spoke with his deep but gentle voice. "Little one, don't be sad. What seem like insurmountable obstacles often have solutions if we change our perspective. We must be flexible like bamboo before life's problems." Spark raised her wet face and looked surprised at the bird, who seemed very wise. He gave her a kind smile and continued, "Instead of lamenting what cannot be changed, observe your surroundings and use your intelligence. Nature always provides if we know how to see opportunities. You will surely find a way to reach those nuts. Have faith in yourself, you are more capable than you believe." After saying this, the owl opened his enormous wings and soared towards the treetops. Spark remained thinking about his words while drying her cheeks. Maybe he was right, and she could find a solution, but how? She decided to take heart and analyze the available elements around her, just as the wise animal had advised. She already felt a little more encouraged and ready to use her ingenuity. She carefully observed the remains of the fallen bridge, the wide torrent, the branches and rocks on the opposite shore. There had to be a way to cross the stream. After drying her tears, Spark stood up and took a deep breath, filling herself with renewed determination. She wouldn't give up. She would show the owl that she could overcome this obstacle with intelligence. She thoroughly examined the stream's contours, looking for something that could help her. Her agile eyes immediately caught sight of a thick log stranded on a rock not far from her. If she could bring it over, maybe she could improvise a new crossing. She quickly measured the distance and realized she would need the log to be longer to cover the gap, but she didn't lose hope. Surely there was a way. She skillfully slid rock by rock until reaching the shore. With great effort, she pushed the heavy log until positioning one end just before the empty space where the bridge broke. She climbed on it to test its resistance, and realized it was too short. It didn't even reach halfway across. Spark snorted in frustration, while her mind worked at full speed. What else was there that she could use? Her eyes detected some thin fallen branches dragged from the bank by the current. That was it. She could try to build an extension with branches and stones to make the log longer. Quickly, the little squirrel began collecting sturdy twigs and rocks of various sizes. With great skill, she began inserting them into the edges of the log, interweaving the branches to hold them. She worked tirelessly, making several trips back and forth, transporting materials twice her size. It wasn't an easy task, but she finally managed to assemble a provisional wood and stone extension at the end of the log. Exhausted but satisfied, Spark stepped back to admire her work. She had doubled the initial length. Surely now it was close enough to jump and reach the other side. Very carefully, she crossed the wobbly improvised log to the end. She propelled herself with her powerful hind legs to jump the last stretch, but it wasn't enough. She fell dramatically into the water where the current dragged her downstream, drowning her squeaks. Soaked and exhausted, Spark managed to get out of the water and crawled back to the broken bridge. She shook her fur, removing excess water, trying to regain warmth. The dunking didn't discourage her but rather fueled her stubborn spirit even more. She looked analytically at her branch extension again. It hadn't been enough. She needed the log to reach lower, so when she climbed up, she would have the extra impulse to cross the remaining gap. But how to achieve that? She couldn't push the heavy log lower by herself. She scratched her chin thoughtfully with her tiny claws. Suddenly another brilliant idea occurred to her upon seeing the long vines hanging from nearby trees. She could use the vines to lower the log. She ran to the bushes and took several sturdy vines with her mouth, dragging them back. With her paws, she skillfully braided them until forming a solid and long improvised rope. She tied one end to the log and threw the other so it would be well secured on a firm branch on the other side. Now came the difficult part. She had to pull the vine with force to tilt the log so the opposite tip would descend into the water. Positioning herself on the farthest shore, Spark took a deep breath and began pulling the vine with all her might. At first nothing happened. Her muscles burned from the effort, but she didn't give up. With perseverance, little by little she managed to tilt the heavy log, making the opposite tip enter the water. It was working. When the log was almost diagonal over the current, she firmly tied the vine to a rock to keep it tilted. Her paws were trembling from exhaustion, but it was worth it. She ran to check her ingenious pulley and saw that the submerged tip now easily reached the other side. With bright eyes, Spark climbed back up the wobbly tied branches to the new elevated tip of the log. She took impulse with her powerful legs and made a huge jump, successfully crossing to the other shore. She had done it thanks to not giving up. Excited, she continued her way to the oak tree in search of her longed-for feast, feeling very proud of her perseverance. After overcoming the stream obstacle with her ingenuity, Spark quickly headed towards the old oak tree loaded with fruits that she had spotted that morning upon waking. Her stomach growled, imagining the juicy and crunchy nuts she would soon taste. She followed a winding path through the ferns until emerging from the forest into a small clearing where an ancient tree stood imposingly. As she approached, a huge smile lit up Spark's face. It was even more perfect than she expected. The robust trunk divided into thick, twisted branches that extended, capturing sunlight, and each of those branches was laden with green capsules filled with delicious fruits. It was a glorious sight. Without wasting time, Spark nimbly climbed the rough trunk and reached the first fork. With her sharp teeth, she opened one of the largest capsules, exposing 4 brown nuts. Their aroma was exquisite. Skillfully, she held a nut between her tiny paws and used her incisors to pierce the hard shell. The crunch it produced when breaking made her mouth water in anticipation of what was to come. She carefully extracted the inner treasure and took a big bite. It was glory. Spark closed her eyes in ecstasy, enjoying how this nut exceeded all her expectations. The fresh and creamy texture of its pulp, the delicate hazelnut flavor with an oak-wood aftertaste was divine. She happily licked her whiskers before gulping down the rest and taking another. Soon she formed a small pile of shelled nuts, ready to keep enjoying that delicacy all day. She treasured them in her cheeks while savoring each bite. Life couldn't be better. In midst of her feast, she noticed a raven perched nearby, watching her intently with hungry eyes. Without hesitation, she threw one of her precious nuts to the bird. He caught it in the air, made a gesture of gratitude with his head, and withdrew to enjoy that rare treat, leaving Spark to continue with her well-deserved banquet. After enjoying her well-deserved feast under the ancient oak, Spark lay belly up on a thick branch, letting the last evening rays caress her fur. Her cheeks were so swollen from the nuts that she feared she wouldn't be able to climb down from the tree, but it had been worth it. While she lay drowsy after that succulent meal, she analyzed everything she had experienced that day. She remembered the fright on the bridge, her tears of frustration, and how she was about to give up in the face of misfortune. But she also recalled the owl's wisdom, how she didn't give up, the ingenious ideas she had, and how good she felt now after overcoming those setbacks. She realized that if she had learned anything, it was that in the face of adversity, one shouldn't complain but stay positive, and that we should always help unfortunate neighbors when we had the opportunity, as she did with the hungry raven. Determined to take advantage of those lessons, she started the return to her tree when her stomach had deflated enough to move. She had one last good deed to perform: rebuild the old fallen bridge so other animals wouldn't face her same fate when crossing the stream. Using her refined teeth, Spark cut long and flexible vines, occasionally stopping to search her memory for how the knots were or which branch fit better. Some curious animals like a fox and some rabbits came closer to observe her work. When she finished, the animals were amazed by her work. proud, Spark shook her little paws in sign of work completed and invited them to test the resistance of her new bridge. Nervous but confident in her, the rabbits were the first to cross swiftly, followed by the fox and finally several squirrels. It had turned out perfect. Everyone cheered enthusiastically for the very smiling Spark for having so wisely repaired the damaged crossing. She was left with the satisfaction of not only having achieved her goal that day but also helping her forest neighbors thanks to the teachings she herself learned along the way. Thus, with her belly and heart full, she happily returned to rest in her hollow tree as the sun set. After a restful sleep following her busy previous day, Spark woke up revitalized with the first morning bird songs. She stretched pleasantly inside her cozy nest in the hollow trunk, ready to start a new day, filling herself with energy from her favorite dried fruits. She poked her head out and deeply inhaled the fresh morning forest air that brought dews and flower aromas. Everything seemed especially beautiful and peaceful after the storm of events she went through yesterday with the broken bridge. She smiled calmly, remembering how she solved the problem. After a light breakfast, she decided to visit again the old oak tree loaded with nuts on the other side of the stream. Although her belly was still somewhat swollen, it never hurt to replenish her pantry and enjoy some bites. She traveled the same path, cheerfully singing, crossing paths with other birds, squirrels, and small rodents who were going out early in search of food. As she passed over her renewed vine bridge, she exchanged cordial greetings with the forest inhabitants who were trying it out, her heart filled with pride and happiness seeing that her work was being useful for the forest animals after her adventures of the previous day. Once in the clearing of the ancient oak, she climbed up the twisted bark, greeting the birds that nested in its robust branches while ascending towards the clusters of nuts. She chose some particularly large and juicy fruits for herself, and then descended to perch on the protruding wide roots to have a splendid breakfast while contemplating nature around her with a peace she hadn't fully appreciated before, having taken it for granted. While savoring the nuts one by one, grateful for the food that Mother Earth provided, she saw that several younger squirrels were timidly approaching the tree in search of something to take to their families, but didn't dare to climb up. Spark made friendly signals to infuse confidence, helped them find the most accessible nuts, and even shared some so they could properly feed their young. Sharing felt very gratifying. Thus she spent a morning of absolute harmony and communion with nature after having overcome her recent challenges. While quietly returning to her home with some extra nuts, she promised to help in whatever way she could any animal in need that she found along the way for the rest of her days. One morning, while frolicking in the grass after breakfast of delicious acorns, Spark spotted in the distance a little fox limping pitifully. Worried, she approached to verify what was wrong. It turned out he had a deep wound in one of his hind legs. Quickly, the ingenious squirrel climbed a nearby willow and tore off some strips of soft bark with her sharp teeth. Then she chewed them until converting them into a paste that she applied to the fox's painful injury to protect it from infections. She completed the improvised treatment by firmly but carefully bandaging the paw with long leaves. The little fox, very grateful, expressed with a sigh, "O noble Spark, your kindness has no limits. You saved me from terrible suffering with your quickness and ingenuity. If only all forest animals could be like you, always predisposed to help others. You are an example for all of us." The little fox's words moved Spark. She never imagined her actions would have such an impact on other forest inhabitants. And then it dawned on her that was her true purpose in life, to be useful to those in need by applying the gifts of intelligence and kindness that nature had bestowed upon her. Feeling wonderful and grateful for that revelation, she sketched a sweet smile, while a tear of happiness danced in her hazel eyes. "Dear friend, thank you for helping me see my worth. I promise to continue being here to assist in whatever way I can any creature of this forest who needs it. And you must above all take good care of that paw until it heals, agreed? One step at a time and we'll all be fine." Having said this, Spark solicitously guided the limping fox to his den so he could get proper rest, and continued roaming her beloved forest in search of any new problem to solve. Now she felt absolute fulfillment with the firm conviction of the great potential we all had within us to change lives, beginning with those closest to us, one simple kind act at a time.